There's a practice I teach, it's the sword practice. And one of the main philosophical tenets of it is that in order to be happier, we need to cut our truth. Let's discuss. Hi, I'm Farah of Tibetan Healing Movement, and today I'd like to talk about truth. So, truth here we're defining as something that's rigid, solid, kind of immovable. And what I'm proposing is that this is completely against nature. Nature is impermanence and change. But we cling to this idea of truth because it's like almost like a safety net, like a life raft that it helps us feel secure. But because it's going against nature, it's actually a main cause of our suffering. It's like we're grasping on to this solid thing, and there is no solid thing. So even I looked up in the dictionary, and even in the dictionary definition, there's more than one. I think like this was the second definition, and it said judgment or idea accepted as true. So this means that like even right in the definition is this acknowledgement that it's still kind of a belief, that we just cling to. And if enough of us together do it, we can label it a truth, but it's still a judgment or a belief. So this idea of truth is connected to solid. And the more we have this solid, rigid, unmovable thing, the more we experience suffering and pain. And in fact, truth seems to be the cause of a lot of pain and suffering in the entire world. Wars are fought over truth. Families have completely broken up over truth. Societies are crumbling because of truth. Even religion, religion, including Buddhism, are only as good as they help us to change and to become better people. And as soon as it becomes about a truth, then religion turns into a poison. And a lot of us have a bad feeling around religion because we know that many wars have been fought over it. But they're not fighting over religion, they're fighting over truth. The real truth is that there is no solid truth. So Buddhism is based on the premise that there's nothing fixed, nothing solid, that, it's about impermanence and change and interdependence. My teacher Tulku Lobsang has said that if ever anyone was to find a solid, Buddhism would be done. Just finished. The thing is that no one has ever found anything solid. The other thing Buddhism says is that the root of our suffering comes from self-grasping. So this is like the clinging to the idea that there's this separate, solid self and this independent self. And what comes from that erroneous belief of a separate solid self is the ego and like my story, my truth. And it's just your truth. So the more that you have this idea of this like solid, separate self, then the more you have this ego story perspective, and the more you have negative emotions, and the more you have suffering. So the astute among you might be saying, but Farah, Buddhism often talks about truth. In fact, one of the fundamental, main first things about Buddhism is called the Four Noble Truths. Okay, first noble truth, the truth of suffering. Yes, there is suffering. And there's a cause of this suffering. And this cause is this self-grasping, this ignorance of the true nature of things and thinking that things are solid and going to stay the same. And then when things change, we suffer. Then the third truth is that there can be an end to this suffering. And the end to this suffering is to recognize the true nature of things. And that true nature being interdependent arising, impermanence, emptiness, empty of a solid truth. So this really points to what I'm talking about, that still, okay, the Four Noble Truths are kind of collectively telling us, don't cling to a truth because that's going to cause suffering. But here, if you understand that things are impermanent and changing, then you can dissolve this suffering. Okay, and another place that Buddhism talks about truth is in the Mahayana branch, the two truths. So one of these truths is the absolute truth, what's absolute. And this is, as I've mentioned, the interconnectedness of everything, the impermanence of everything. Emptiness is the absolute truth. But then we also have the conventional truth, right? Around me, this counter feels pretty solid. This body feels pretty solid. But we already know, even from our science, that when you look a little bit closer, it's not so solid. In fact, it's 99.999% space. There is nothing solid. So, what I think we can conclude, what I'm concluding, is that the problem is the belief that there is one truth, that there is just one solid truth, when in fact there are many truths. There are many dimensions and many layers and many angles, and things change over time. And this, I mean, this is always relevant, but this is coming up for me personally a lot right now, and for our society, because there's a lot of misinformation, conflicting information, and it's hard to know right now what's true, what's really going on, what's true. So what I propose is that it's all kind of true, and it's also all a lie. It's not that you can point to this thing and say that person and that perspective is completely true, and that one over there is completely lie. This one has some things of truth, some elements about it that are pointing to something, and this one over here also does. So the skill and the discernment comes in finding these shades of things and not clinging to it. Being okay with having a dynamic, changing truth. We are changing moment to moment. Everything's changing. It isn't solid. There can be something that's true in this moment, and then situations change and it's different in the next moment. So we need to not cling and grasp at one solid truth. We have to be willing to reassess. And I also feel that this is something that I feel that many of our fields of academics, science, are in a crisis right now. And it's because of a clinging to a dogma. And, science should be a dynamic, evolving story. It's a gathering of information. And as there's more information, the thesis, the hypothesis, should change and evolve and grow and expand with the new information. But often there's this rigid clinging to a dogma, and it keeps us limited and it keeps us trapped. So if we really want to be unlimited, we should be open and dynamic and, using an ongoing discernment and awareness. Because as soon as we find ourselves clinging to this solid truth, that's when we start suffering, and that's when we start fighting with each other. Because what could be 100% true for me might be in conflict with you, but what you're seeing and saying and feeling is very likely 100% true for you. So I think there would be so much more ease and peace in the world and in our lives and in our families if we learned how to not cling to truth and to embrace multiple truths. Okay, let me know your thoughts on this. There's a lot of nuances and layers, and I don't claim to have the truth. So feel free to give me your truth, and we can do this together. All right, well, thank you so much for your time and attention, most valuable resources. If you'd like to learn more about some of the things I mentioned, the sword practice, you can hop over to my website, TibetanHealingMovement.com. And I'd love to share more with you and hear from you in the future. Thank you.